Good morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are, and welcome to a Nerd Tube debate. I am Cousin Cheeto. I am joined here by my comrade in arms and also fellow Final Fantasy player, Gary Cloud Strife. How are you doing?
I did all right.
And unfortunately, our friend Block, who was supposed to be here to debate Final Fantasy VI, was not able to make it, but he did give us a video package like an old WWF style, pre-recorded. So, Block, go ahead and say hello.
Good day, Internet. NerdTube, thank you for having me.
Okay, so with that all being said, now we're gonna go in. So with this format a little bit, we are going to talk about our favorite Final Fantasies as they, because my favorite Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy 9. Gary's is Final Fantasy 7, and Block's is Final Fantasy 6. And so on um we've had plenty of debate on what that means to us. And sorry, hold on, I don't know what's going on with this stupid thing. This StreamYard's being dumb. But yeah, so and Gary apparently has been called away, which tracks with our track record of doing these things. So I guess we're gonna let Block start with talking about Final Fantasy VI while we wait for Gary to get back. So there we go. And this is what we're doing is we're kind of breaking this down into different sections, like characters, main villain, plot, battle systems, summons, miscellaneous, stuff like that. So we're kind of going to be getting into all of that. So I guess we will let Block start us off here.
Jason and Gary, thank you for having me. I look forward to our discussion of Final Fantasy VI Verse 7 Verse 9, which is the best game amongst the three, and which game is probably the best in the Final Fantasy series overall. I got some notes here, so hopefully I'm going kind of off your guys' kind of flow, but if not, you're just going to have to keep up with me. Okay, so as far as Final Fantasy VI, it was actually not the first Final Fantasy game I ever played. That distinction belongs to 7. I played 7. I would say I only played the first hour or two. And, this is back in the days of video rental stores and such. So I didn't actually buy it. I rented it. I don't know how I picked it up. I think maybe I just thought it was cool looking. And I'm like, oh, it was probably even my first RPG. I'm not sure. Then I went back and I played 4 maybe a year or two later. Like I played through the whole game. And I liked it. But I never beat it. I played through the whole game, but I never beat it, so I guess I didn't play through the whole game. I think I got to maybe the final segment, basically. So I misspoke there. Final Fantasy VI was the first Final Fantasy I ever played all the way through and then beat. I got it at the rental store and kept. Luckily, no one deleted my save, and then I went and bought it, and I think I played through it again. So Final Fantasy VI has a special place in my heart, not because it was the first Final Fantasy experience, but it's the first one I liked, and then it's the first time I actually bought a Final Fantasy. And I still, occasionally every few years, I'll pick it up. I mean, like every 5 or 10 years, I'll just beat it just to beat it, because it always comes out either as a remake or on a new system. So I'm just like, yeah, I'll play it. So Final Fantasy VI.
All right, so that's kind of the first benchmark I have where we talk about Gary. I was talking about our intros, just about like what the games mean to us and everything like that. So Block shared his of Final Fantasy VI. Do you want to go ahead, or do you want me to go ahead with our Final Fantasies?
Yeah. So Final Fantasy VII for me was a console seller. Now the thing is that I was into you call it Genesis, we called it a Mega Drive. I was playing that, and I tried to get one of those horrible CDXs, and was it 332Xs or whatever it's called, and the CD. But people told my parents not to touch it with the biggest barge pole you got in life. But then I saw this advert for this game called Final Fantasy VII, and it was like, the animation was great on it. The orchestra. So that was the first time, because I hadn't really heard of the series before then. It hadn't really come across my. Because I think that the games, I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, were all on the NES and SNES.
Mm-hmm.
So they haven't really come across my thing of something that I wanted to play. But anyway, I started playing this game, and it was phenomenally good. So, Final Fantasy VII wasn't only my introduction to the series, it's also my introduction to turn-based polygon cartoon anime. I'm not going to use the word cartoon, anime sort of gameplay, and also, really long storytelling. The thing is that, so, like, from that, I have played the other games. I'm going to go into, so that was basically, Final Fantasy VII was my gateway into that type of gameplay. So that's the reason but also it's a really good game because of the plot elements and the ideas that it has. But yeah, you tell me how you got into Final Fantasy. Was it the same way or was it different?
Yep, actually, so here's my deal, and I've told this to a lot of people: is my favorite Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy VII, but that is based on nostalgia alone. And we're not arguing here what our favorite Final Fantasy is. We are arguing what the better Final Fantasy is. And so I've said for many, many, many years, after playing both games many, many times, that although Final Fantasy VII is my favorite based on nostalgia, it is also but Final Fantasy IX is the best Final Fantasy in my opinion. I've played them all. For the most part, I've seen what every game has to offer. And keep in mind, I'm not saying I like all three of these games. I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh God, six is shit," or seven's just garbage.
Six is a really, really good game.
Yeah, so we're not sitting here saying, "Oh, those other games are garbage. Mine's the best." No, we're saying this is the top 3 Final Fantasies in my opinion. So we're kind of just arguing semantics at this point. Yay!
Yeah.
But yeah, so my introduction was I did play Final Fantasy VII. I was a freshman in high school. My buddy introduced me to it. It was my first real RPG. I'd played some kind of RPGs before, but this was a very this was my first experience into RPGs. But Final Fantasy IX just has, and we'll get into all the details of characters, plots, and villains and stuff like that. But just overall, generally, the game itself is just better. The characters, the main protagonist, we'll get to the main villains in a little bit, but by the way, the main villain or the main protagonist does not have to be the last person you fight in the game.
No.
I don't feel like Necron from 9 is technically the main villain. The main villain is the person you chase throughout the whole game. And I've got some more thoughts on that when we get to the main villain section. But yeah, this game, I really felt like this game exemplifies everything Final Fantasy past, present, and honestly future, because Final Fantasy games since 9 and maybe 10, I'm not a huge fan of 10, but have really not delivered on the Final Fantasy franchise. And we've seen a lot of 16, and we feel like 16 is actually going to come back to this formula a little bit. And I'm not counting the MMOs in that. I know that the MMOs are kind of
Did you play the last one, which was what, 16?
15.
Was it 15? Yeah, the one where they're on the road trip to get to the I actually like that. I actually like that a lot.
I didn't hate the game, but I wasn't super impressed by it either. So I'm like, okay, it was okay.
Okay, but okay, so how do we want to do this? What's the
next section we're going to go into is characters. So as we talked about, we'll let Block lead us off, and then we'll go off of that.
Cool.
Your main party consists of a little over, I would say, it's 12 characters and then a few useless ones, in my opinion. I think it's about 16 total. Don't quote me. because there's some party members that are only there as like guests for like a little story segment. So if you want to count those, it's more than 16. Um, the main party I think is pretty cool. It's a nice little balance between all the characters. Like you got your heavy, your physical fighters, your brute fighters, and then you got more of your magic users. But in Final Fantasy VI, just about everyone can learn magic, which I'll go into later. Pretty much like after the first quarter of the game, everyone can learn magic kind of anyway. But some people just have higher stats to, as far as magic defense and magic attack. And they all have different skills, and surprisingly, they all have pretty much decent backstories, or at least some kind of character depth to them. So that's cool, especially when you consider that's over 12 characters you have to give like a backstory to. Not every single character has a backstory, but they kind of have like a personality. I would say a good 10 of them have a good backstory, and the rest just you kind of pick up and you're like, okay, fine. There's really no bad party members per se, main party members. There's some optionals like Gugu or whatever that just does mimic, and then Ulamar, which is like a Yeti snowman. Strong physical fighter, but doesn't. I mean, you pretty much already have 3 or 4 of those already, and I don't know. He's just optional. I never really used him much towards the end of the game, but I picked him up just to have him, I guess. Like I said, they all have like pretty good backstories and motivation and character depth. Maybe some you're like, as like actual when like you actually go into battle. Some of them you might not want to use, but they all seem like they have some worth to them. There doesn't seem too many, like I said, with the exception I mentioned earlier with a few useless ones, and maybe Gao is kind of useless. I mean, he's got, which I'll go into later, his ability, but out of like 14 or 16 characters, you only got 3 or 4 that they're not useless, but it's like And like I said, the majority, a good 90% of them have good backstories, good character, and you use them regularly in battle. So, yeah.
All right, so I'll lead off on this one. Since this is a debate, I am going to kind of counter block where it's like, yeah, just because, and I'm not going to, just because you have 16, 12, whatever, how many characters were in 6, I don't know, there was a billion of them. That doesn't mean that they're good characters. He's right. Like, the Yeti guy, Go-Go, even Gao. Well, Gao had more of a plot significance than a usefulness as a party member. But like, just because you have more party members does not make your game better. I'm sorry. Like, you got to give them something to do. You got to give them something to make them stand out. And you could play through the entire game and not get Go-Go and the Yeti. And isn't there another one? There's some other useless one that I can't even remember at this point. And and you can play through the whole game without getting them. I will give Block the fact that the core cast, like there's like 5 or 6 of the core cast that you could play through the entire game, and you need them there because they are very core members of that whole story. So, but with 9, I feel like every single character, even Quina to a point, Quina's your closest to a useless character. Well, and Amaranth might be. Well, Amaranth just comes late in the game, but he's still pretty important to the story progression. But but most of the characters have a really laser focused part to play in the story. Like this game is very story based, and so even side characters like Beatrix has got some really crazy story elements to the game. I mean, Zidane and Garnet are awesome. I love them as a couple, and I mean, it's not forced. It's not forced like okay. So in 7, you've got like the ambiguity of Tifa, Aerith, and Cloud, that love triangle, whatever. In 6, there's not really much going on, but it's like, but in other games like 10, and no, not 13. In 10,
9.
no, no,
No, 8. Sorry,
yeah, 8.
8
Eight's
is
the,
eight
oh,
is really ham-fisted.
yeah, it's like really like they're and I mean it even goes to the point of like in post content in 10 that Titus and Yuna break up. So it's like they're very force hand Yuna and Titus. In this game, Garnet and Zidane kind of naturally grow together. And that's what I love about those two characters. Vivi's character is very, very interesting. And I honestly feel like they didn't lean far enough into it. But like Vivi, being this created mage and all that other stuff was just very, very interesting to me. Steiner's character, the growth of Steiner throughout the game, they really put a lot of TLC into that character. And honestly, I felt like they kind of missed the trick where, in the siege of Alexandria on disc 2, yeah, the end of disc 2, I felt like they missed a trick where they could have killed Steiner, and then that would have put Beatrix in his spot in the party, and that would have been a huge character growth for Beatrix. Because Steiner, although he's a big goof and everything, he's a very stoic character, and yeah, he's not cool, but at the same time, there was a lot that was going on there with Steiner, and just people just see him as this big goof. Freya's got a huge story arc in this game, and she's awesome, and she's just badass completely. And I don't know. I mean, I'm probably missing somebody, more than likely, but yeah, I mean, and then look at all the ancillary characters like the troop, and Baku and his crew. Yeah, as I said before, Beatrix, who's a character you don't even get. Like Blank in the beginning, like gets petrified, and you're like, you feel for him and you've just met these people. As I said, the only one Quina actually plays a story because Quina is somehow like related to the person who was Vivi's grandpa. So, there's some story connection there. Plus it's a journey for him, and stuff like that. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. The characters of this game are just so deep and so, I don't know. As I said, Amaranth's the one that kind of falls short in my opinion. No game is immune to that. His purpose there was clear, but at the same time, he was like the Vegeta to Zidane's Goku. Oh, I have to get better than you. Okay, well, okay, whatever. All right, Boss Man, go at it.
Okay, so as is this debate, thing is that I'm surprised that Block didn't bring up Sabin or something like that. Someone who's actually a really, really interesting character from 6. But I'd say that 7 has the better characters overall because all the characters actually do something and contribute to the plot. So even ones that are a little bit silly, like for example, Cat Safe. Cat Safe is actually a Shinra infiltrator to the party. So like you got Vincent the vampire, you got Yuffie with the ninja, you got you got all the characters who contribute something to the party and they're not just a different version of a different character that we see. They're all unique persons. They all have their own character. They're all unique. Whereas I think for 9, because they're all traveling artists, they all feel a bit samey to me. I mean, not sucking it off at all, because I think that 9's story about death, and we'll get that into the plot a bit, is a very interesting one, and it's based upon all the other characters' in relationship to death. Whereas 7 deals with people's striving against environmental catastrophe, and I think the fact that they're all different parts of this world, that they come from different worlds, not just from humans. They're like the vampires, they're animated toys, they're flaming people with children. They're all sorts, and that's the reason I like the characters in 7 more than I like the others, just because they just feel more lived in and they feel more varied than just human male number 2 who happens to look a little bit like Zidane but doesn't quite. Or like the only one who stands out in 9s is the Oracle looking guy. I can't remember what his character is. Sorry, I've actually been playing it recently. So the black mage guy. Everyone else just kind of blends into the background, whereas in 7, everybody is their own unique thing. I think 6 has this problem as well because as Spot was saying, there's 20 characters, and with that, you're going to get some sort of repetition and some sort of, whereas it's much more tighter written, it's much more tighter presented, and that's why I like the class to 7 more.
Well, and just to retort a little bit, I mean, Vincent, although he is cool and I like using him, he is the most useless character in, and that's what I'm hoping the remake fixes. By the way, we're not including the remake in this at all, just because our games haven't had remakes, which they shouldn't, truth be told. Well, maybe 6 could. 6 could use for a remake. 9, I think, still stands up to this day. Anyway, but Vincent, I hate the fact that he's an optional character because he is a cool character. And I feel like his backstory that you see in ancillary games, and we'll get into this during the plot, but Vincent is he's kind of just there. He's like, Sephiroth? You said Kef or Hojo? Hojo. He's just there. And there's not really too much of a payoff with him in the OG game. So that's why I'm hoping they fix a lot of that in the remake when they get to Vincent. But yeah, I mean, I see a lot of your points here because you're right. A lot of the characters in 7 do hold very, very specific points, except for, as I said, Vincent. I feel like he was a victim of rushing the game out because he was supposed to have a much bigger part, and you got a lot of that bigger part in other forms of
the Dirge of Cerberus games. So.
Yeah, Dirge of Cerberus and I think it's before Crisis. Yeah, I mean there was a lot of stuff that came out after 7, and that'll be a point I will bring up against 7 in the plot section. But I do definitely agree with you that that there's a lot of that, and even in 6, as I said, the problem with 6 is that there's just too many characters and not enough for them to do, and a lot of them are optional, and there's probably about 6 characters that you could have and still go through the game without a problem. All right, so we're gonna go in. Unless you have anything else to add,
that's it.
All right, now we're gonna talk main villain.
Main villain,
Right.
which is probably one of my main points for arguing why Final Fantasy VI is one of the best amongst 7 and 9. Definitely 9, because 9. Who's 9's villain? Necron? Or is it that bouncy ball? Either way, Final Fantasy 6 and 7 definitely have the best villain in the Final Fantasy series. Please, somebody argue who's better villain in Final Fantasy series. Exdeath? Wasn't Exdeath the tree? Golbez? Come on now. It's between Sephiroth and Kefka, let's be honest. Some may say Titus's dad is the final Aeon. Not really, because he wasn't even really the main villain. He was possessed by Yu Yevon, and that battle was BS. The final battle with Yu Yevon, it's like you can't die unless you somehow petrify yourself, or you'd basically have to kill yourself to lose that battle. And it's just an annoyingly long battle if you don't do the right techniques. He just keeps healing. Anyway, this ain't about Final Fantasy X. What this is about is the greatest villain ever, Kefka. I would say Sephiroth is almost tied with him. But the reason I say Kefka is better, and we're not even talking about Necron here, is because Sephiroth you can kind of sympathize with. You get in his backstory and you're like, oh, he used to be kind of normal, and then he kind of flipped out when there were other powers and environmental influences that kind of twisted him, and he was like, oh, I was lied to this whole time. So you can kind of see oh, he was a good person, then he just kind of got misled and went crazy and whatnot. Still not saying it's okay to burn down an entire village because you read something, but you can kind of see how it got to that point. Kefka, his backstory is basically he's always been insane. I mean, they said he was experimented on as a young member in the Empire, and that just warped his brain. And in Final Fantasy VI, he's insane throughout. There's no point where you're I sympathize with this character, or you ever hear about him being normal. Nope, he's always crazy, and he just likes to destroy. He wants to see pain, whereas not Kefka. Whereas Sephiroth, he's like, oh, I just want to bring the world in balance and make things better-ish, at least in his warped, twisted view. Kefka's like, no, I just want to destroy everything. I have my motive is just to destroy. And he actually succeeds. Unlike other villains in other Final Fantasy series, in entries, excuse me. Mid-game, spoiler, he pretty much destroys the world. It turns upside down. It basically looks like when you, after mid-game and the sequence of events happens, basically looks like nukes have went off around the entire world map. Like the world of Final Fantasy VI is in ruins. Like people are barely hanging on. So that's why I think the main villain, he's the best, because he saw, he's you can't sympathize with him. He's crazy. You never know where it's going, where he's thinking. You're like, okay, he's a bad guy, so he wants to take over the world or something. He doesn't really want to take control of the world or anything. He just kind of wants to destroy it and sit upon a mountain of skulls. He's not really interested in ruling people or getting people. Like if people worship him, he's like, okay, but he doesn't seek that out. Like he'll gladly kill somebody that kisses his butt against somebody that battles him. Like he doesn't care. He's like, oh, you worship Kefka, whatever. Oh, you hate Kefka, he'll bolt of judgment to both of them. And he's basically a crazy clown, but at the end of the game, he's redesigned. He's not like dressed as a court jester. He's more like a fallen angel. So Final Fantasy VI had that kind of idea first. And look, Sephiroth did the fallen angel thing too. So 7's copying heavily from elements of Final Fantasy VI.
All right. Well, I don't know if you heard a lot of that, Boss Man, or not, but basically he was saying that Kefka's the best because he kills whole cities with poison, and this is probably going to be one of my weakest arguments here, but I will let you go first, since Block apparently thinks that that it's between Kefka and Sephiroth. So I'll let you go first.
Well, Kefka's the clown. I mean, I don't not being funny. He's literally a clown. The thing is with Sephiroth is that you don't really see him a lot for like the first, at least the first CD. You may be like people talking about him as this sort of like legend and stuff like that, but you never really see him because like people like wondering, like they're talking about him, what things he did and stuff like that. So you know, like when you get to the end and you see him, like there's this fire, and you see him like when Cloud's talking about past events, and you see him like through fire turn around, and you always see like the side of his face and stuff like that, and then he walks off. That is a great introduction to a villain because people are actually talking about him, and that he's this fallen hero, but he's literally a part of this like alien person called Jehovah and stuff like that, and I just love that. I love the idea of somebody who was a hero turned into a villain, and literally this legend. I mean, he's basically the closest thing I could think of is, I know this movie's not very good, but The Rock, where the lead guy is, and where the villain is Ed Harris, and he plays this like literal guy who's literally this war hero who's literally like got every like US medal going. And Sephiroth is basically that same character, but he's in much more depth, and we get to see his relationship to the world around him, the things around him. And I do think that Kefka, when you see him, he's like over the top and dramatic and stuff, whereas Sephiroth is much more laid back, and then whenever you see him, it's much more powerful. Like, and big spoilers here, when he kills Aerith, it's like a dagger to the heart, because literally, it's the greatest villain ever, killing, somebody who Cloud's come to, have a deep connection with, for reasons that I'm going to get into in a bit. But I love that bit. And the thing is, maybe I'm trying to remember who the villain is in now. I think there's a couple.
Well,
Well, I
but
think that
really,
be
the main villain of 9 is really Kuja. I mean, the main protagonist, if you want to call it as such. So, I mean, I get it. Like, okay, the villain aspect of 9 is not exactly the best, but at the same time, when you really deep, deep dive into it, yes, there's Garland. Necron was the final boss, but he like it was thrown in at the last minute, and it was supposed to be Garland, like Garland's final form. But honestly, Kuja is the main protagonist in Final Fantasy 9. Like Kuja's the one you're chasing. Kuja's the one who is doing all the manipulating and everything. Kuja's the one who is at the end of the game, the one that is, just in all the whimy timey stuffs and does all the betrayals and everything. So, I mean, that's really my only argument is I think Kuja does a really good job at spreading his influence all over the world. Whereas Sephiroth is kind of like stuck in the Northern Crater, and yeah, you have Genova, that is kind of that's going around looking for Sephiroth because really the Sephiroth you see until the Northern Crater is Genova. It is not actually Sephiroth. It is Genova transforms herself into like an image of Sephiroth, and she's the one that's going around, or like it's a part of whatever. Kefka is just a clown, like you said. Like Kefka's just because you're bad for for the sake of being bad. Like I think they were just like let's just go balls to the wall and just make him like we're gonna have him poison a whole village. We're gonna have him burn the world. We're gonna have to. That's not to me. That's not a good villain. That's like a good anarchist, but like that doesn't make a believable villain to me. So that's my issue with Kefka. Kuja was more. He's kind of more the score. Like he had issues growing up. He had all these different like with Garland and everything like that. Like Garland sent him to the planet to kind of prepare everything and just get the world in shambles. And technically, Kuja did the exact same thing. Kuja not only had Alexandria destroy Bursamisia, which was the rat country, and also Lindblom. Also, then Kuja turned around and then destroyed Alexandria. Like that whole continent was just absolutely decimated by the end of the game. And then, I mean, granted, the rest of the world wasn't so much civilized as the main continent, the Mist continent was, but like Kuja pretty much fulfilled what he was also doing was he was more playing a Cold War on everybody else. And I thought that was a lot more clever than Kuja just putting 3 statues in certain places and blowing up the world.
okay, but I'd counter that by saying that Shinra was also a villain because the Shinra Corporation is doing things that hurt the world. Like I mean, we'll go into that more when we talk about the plot of these stories. But I think that Shinra, the corporation, is doing much more harmful things than Sephiroth is. Sephiroth is just like this agent of not chaos, but an agent of an alien force, basically setting up to destroy it. But Shinra's already doing that. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean but that's also going back to like Queen Brine. Like, like there's elements to these villains, but like the main villains don't have to be the last person you're fighting. Okay, so unless you have anything else to add, let's move on to the plot. So this is kind of going to be a nice little chunky chunk. So let's jump into this. I do have some stuff here from Block, so we'll let him say his piece, and then we'll just rip it apart like normal.
The plot, if I can do this kind of quick, it kind of takes place in maybe the 1800s Industrial Revolution kind of setting, as far as like on Earth, how Earth has it in the 1800s Industrial Revolution. There's steam powered stuff. There's some there's a lot of mechanical stuff going on. They have trains. So a departure from previous Final Fantasies where there's a there's a fantasy element. It's like medieval times. So they definitely went a different route there. The main plot is the Empire, the bad guys, have found a way to harvest magic. Everyone used to use magic, but then there's a war of the Magi, and magic they thought went away, but it still kind of exists. There's a separate world where espers exist, which are basically magical beings. They seal themselves away from like the earthly realm, but the Empire wants to find their way into it so they can use magic, because all their machines are just way more powerful, harnessing the power of magic. Because who can stop them when you can use magic? So these they look like kind of like mech fighters. They're bipedal machines, basically. It's like a suit of armor. So they're called Megatech, I guess you'd call it. And yeah, the Empire uses that. And like I said, they experimented on some of their own generals, infusing like that magic essence into them. So it like does weird side effects. Kefka being one of them. Celsius, excuse me. Celis, I think. I never got her name pronounced right. We'll call her Celis. And probably some others. So anywho, the plot is the Empire wants to harness that stuff. Terra, who's one of the main characters, gets kind of controlled by the Empire. She doesn't know where she came from, her birth. She's just been brought up in the Empire. They kind of control her with a slave device. And just basically later, the good guys of the game, like a little rebel group, the Returners, which are some of the main characters are part of, get a hold of her after she had an accident, and she's like has amnesia. And throughout the game, you just kind of like helping her find out who she is. Other characters, you're learning their backstory and why they're fighting against the Empire. Everyone's kind of lost something due to the Empire, or they just hate the Empire because they're the Empire. And then somewhere close to mid-game, you think there's like a truce, and it turns out no, they just kind of trick the heroes into leading them to the gate of the Espers. And then the Espers break out, and Kefka really he starts absorbing them and such. So yeah, without going too much into plot, it's a lot of plot. Basically, like I said, mid-game, when I was talking about the main villain, Kefka, he kills the Emperor, and he basically just takes over the world. He pretty much absorbs most of the magic because they find their way into the Esper world, and they also find the gate, and they mix up these statues, which are the essence, I guess, of all magic. You know, the Espers wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for these three statues, these goddess statues. They used to be actual gods, a goddess, but then when they departed, they just left like statues, which are like their essence. But Kefka messes with them, so he pretty much absorbs most magic in the world and just becomes really a god, but I call him more of a demigod. And so that's only mid-game. And then you go on throughout the other half of the game, just trying to somewhat restore the world, find all your lost friends, your party members. And it's kind of fun. Just, see, you have to start from square one. When you mid-game, you're like, oh, we're pretty powerful and stuff. And then you have to restart from square one. Learn more powerful magic, find all your friends, beat these horribly tough bosses. Monsters are roaming all over the place. These 8 dragons that were released when the world entered Cataclysm, just random monsters. Doomgaze, stupid Doomgaze. Battle system.
All right, so that's Block's take on the plot of Final Fantasy VI. Garrett, wait, was it me? No, I start this time. So yeah, Final Fantasy VI, pretty straightforward plot. I mean, you're chasing down Kefka. There's a lot going on. You're going around the world. You're on the run because you're the returners. The people going against the Empire and stuff like that. Plot of Final Fantasy IX is the commonality between our 3 games is that we're always chasing somebody. Like we're like that desperate guy at 2:00 at the bar that's just like chasing after that platinum haired whatever at the end. So the plot of 9 is more or less, there's a Cold War going on with Kuja. Kuja is basically pitting all the nations against one another. He's arming Alexandria and basically brings ruin to that entire continent. Then he goes to the outer islands and the outer continents and the mystery continents and stuff like that. And so by this point, you're chasing Kefka around, but Kefka's obviously got this whole plan put together, and he's pretty much succeeded in everything he wants to do. He even takes over Garland's ship, the Eye in the Sky. Um, they're releasing the Eldens from Garnet. There's just so much going on in this game that it's just like it's hard to get through. And this could be a whole bit. That's why I'm like, this isn't like a hey, we're going to explain the entire plot of our games. Like, but if you've played 9, there is a lot of intricacies in this game and in these plots that intertwine together. And as I said, you have to play the 9 for yourself to get what you're getting into, because it's a lot. Like these games are classics for a reason. All 3 of these games are great because of certain reasons. So but it really centers around a lot like the Cold War that Kuja, or the influence of Kuja around all the nations, and then him trying to get back at Garland, who was the one who sent him there, his alien origin, and as well as Zidane's alien origin, and also just about friendship and life and freedom and all these other things that's going on. And I had one last point. Now I don't remember what it was. So go ahead, Gary. Give us your FF7 lowdown.
Okay, so Final Fantasy 7 is about 3 or 4 different things, so it's going to be difficult to talk about. So the main plot of Final Fantasy 7 is about the Shinra Corporation is literally sucking the life energy out of the Earth for its own monetary gain. So it's literally how it fills itself, how it makes money, is by literally sucking life energy out of the world through these reactors. Now, the characters we follow are part of a environmentalist eco-terrorist group who destroy these towers in order to stop this happening. Now, the thing is that Shinra itself knows that this is what they're doing, but doesn't care because it's getting the money. So it's a very capitalist, very eco-environmentalist message. But also there's a couple of other subplots, which are, the fact that Cloud came from the city where Barrett lives and stuff like that, and he knew Tifa for when they were growing up, and that he probably would look after her. This is and he used to be part of the Shinra forces known as Soldier, and that there was a special thing that they had to go through, which was to say Genova, and that somehow turned them into these wicked, very super special soldiers. Also, the thing is that as the plot goes on, we find out that Cloud's claims of being a soldier are as accurate as it could be. That he was a soldier, but he wasn't one of these super soldiers. That actually the person who was that was Eris' long lost love, who got killed in a battle, and that basically Cloud took a lot of what he did and turned it into things he did. Now that's the thing is that Cloud redeems himself and becomes much more than that and becomes a hero. But the thing is that Sephiroth is the one who outs him as being this driver. So these got 3 or 4 different plots going on at the same time, and none of them are overshadowing the other than the main plot, which is about the environmental eco-terrorist plot.
Okay. See, here's my main argument against Final Fantasy VII, though, and I've always said this about 7. As I said, it is, by nostalgia, it is my favorite game, but it is a fragmented story. You have to play 4 different games to get the whole story of Final Fantasy VII from the OG. Now, I'm not even including if they would have done Final Fantasy VII as a complete story, and then they added to it with Dirge of Cerberus, and then they added to it with Before Crisis and all this. But there are major plot points in Final Fantasy VII that you cannot get and actually don't make much sense without playing the other games or at least knowing of the other media. My biggest gripe with Final Fantasy VII is that the story is a hot mess. If you take it for at face value, which you're right, is this eco-terrorist group, they're chasing Sephiroth, they're trying to that's fine. Like that's a good story. You're right. That is a good story, and the characters are great doing that. But like all this other stuff going on around them and stuff like that, as I said with Vincent, like so much goes on with Vincent, but you have to go into other games just to find out what the hell he's doing there. And even with Yuffie, like I'm okay with them saying, hey, there was a Wutai war, but prior to the game starting, that's fine. That's where her character derives from. But there's still a lot of unanswered questions from that within the bulk of the OG story. And as I said, I feel like the remake is going to answer a lot of these questions, which I'm very happy about. We've already seen the remake answer a lot of questions that we've had over the years, but in the original game, it definitely it's fragmented. Final Fantasy VI it's a nice adventure. There's some great moments in it, but truth be told, that's kind of what it is. I mean, you can sit there and you can argue, this is whatever it was, but at the end of the day, I didn't feel like there was a draw to the characters. But I will say that seven is probably the lowest on this tier for me, just plot wise, just because of the mess that it's in.
But I think that the other plots that were added to it was because it's a successful game, not because the story wasn't well told, because I thought it was. Because you got to remember that Final Fantasy VII was literally a console seller. No matter what we want to say about it. And when you're a console seller, people want to milk that particular cow until there is no milk left. That's the reason that we got 2 films out of Final Fantasy.
No, because
that's the reason why we got
because in the remake they're reusing dropped story beats. Like they're literally adding things that were in a part of the original conception of Final Fantasy VII that they dropped, but still they were probably really important. Like, okay, so for example, in the first Midgar run, the big explosion happens. There is in the original game, there is a quote of Jesse basically saying, I really don't feel like my bomb should have made that much of an explosion, but maybe it was a chain reaction or so. I don't know. They actually elaborate on that in the remake. But in the original game, it's just a throwaway line. Like, they're like, yeah, this explosion was way too big, but whatever. It's like, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. They never address Kate Sith. Like, they never address the fact that he's Reeve from the Shinra Corporation. They never bring up why he is, and they do that in other games. Vincent's the biggest one. Why is he there? What is he doing? What is his connection? You literally get a almost post game, the Key of the Ancients or whatever it was called. At the end of the game, that has a little bit of character development for Vincent, but still, other than that, there's nothing for Vincent besides the conversation in the crypt. There's barely anything about him in Hojo. You don't even have to take him into the Hojo fight if you don't want to. So that's why I'm kind of like, 7 it has a lot of holes, and it's still a great game. Don't get me wrong, but like if we're gonna nitpick, I'm gonna nitpick. So,
but as I said, the thing is with 7 is that it has a lot of plots that he does very, very well. As I said, he does about 3 or 4. The plot about the fact that Cloud isn't who he pretends himself to be, and that he's a fraud, and that Shinra is this horrible thing, this horrible company. Now the thing is, I'll agree with you that the Cerberus and all the Crisis Core and all that sort of stuff weren't really my cup of tea, just because I think that the main game told a good enough story without them, and I think they added stuff to it that, if they wanted to do, like, for example, following Vincent after the events, cool, we help with that, or they wanted to follow Yuffie, I'm cool with that, The thing is that the reason they did that is because, as I said, Final Fantasy VII is and still is this huge seller. That's the reason why we got the remake.
I honestly feel like the commercials sold that game more than the plot did.
I disagree.
No, I think it was a commercial seller because the commercials sold it. It was cool looking. It was different. It was on the new PlayStation 1 instead of the Nintendo. They really pushed this thing to the moon. You should see some of the go back and look at the advertisements for 7. They were literally taking pot shots at Nintendo, in their advertisements. So I feel like it was, granted, it was cool and it was a great looking for the time. It was a great looking game. It was very interesting, but I don't think here's the thing. I don't think it sold because here's the thing. Final Fantasy VIII is also a commercial success. That doesn't mean that it was a good game. And I know we're going to get Final Fantasy VIII people who are like, you stupid Final Fantasy VIII hater. I'm just saying, in my opinion, 8 is one of the worst. But just because a game sells well does not mean it is the best game.
No. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that because again, because the thing with Final Fantasy, especially with the other ones, is that it deals with 1 or 2 storylines. It doesn't deal with 3 or 4. It especially doesn't deal with the fact that the hero of the story is this lying sort of like, I wouldn't say Don Quixote. I'm trying to think of a character like maybe Baron Munchausen, where he's taking somebody else's story and molding it into his own. And I like the fact that we don't find that out until later that he is this like, person who's done this horrible thing, and did it to Aerith, this person that he, had a sort of like romantic, tension with. And I think that's one thing he also does well is the kind of sort of love triangle between Tifa, Cloud, and Aerith. Because usually with love triangles, there could be a little bit, oh god, there's one obvious one that is going to ruin that. There isn't, Aerith is one kind of character, Tifa's one kind of character, and you can see why he's conflicted. Because Aerith is this lovely flower selling, magical, otherworldly character, whereas Tifa is his childhood friend.
Is the best damn character and has the best assets ever. Tifa's fucking Cloud X Tifa. Fight me. I don't care. I think Cloud and Tifa were destined to be together, just like Zack and Aerith were destined to be together.
Yeah, but as I said, personally, I agree with you. But like as I said, because I always thought like Tifa was hotter than Aerith. Don't at me, people. But as I said, that's why I like the plot of 7 better than. Nine's got a really good plot. Don't get me wrong. And as I said, I think the plot of 6 is a little bit simplistic. I'd probably say that 9 is probably closest to 7's plot, but again 6, because I think 6 is a little bit evil, genocidal maniac takes over the empire. Is not exactly the most complicated plots of all time.
Yeah, I agree with you right there. It's just kind of and honestly, they did it in Final Fantasy 2, except they used the Emperor as the Emperor basically was this genocidal maniac and he was killing people, and yeah, it kind of was done already. Like in truth be told, don't get me wrong, Kefka's a great villain. I can't argue the fact that Kefka is or that Kuja is better than Kefka or Sephiroth, but I still feel like that they're all 3 of them are in very close contention in my opinion. Okay. So okay, I think we've kind of beat that dead horse. All right, so just for time's sake, let's go into the battle system a little bit. We're going to play a little bit of what Block says about the battle system, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the battle system.
Similar to previous ones, as far as you got to wait for your ATB bar to fill up. Pretty much the normal magic spells: fire, ice, no water. Ultima, I don't think you got meteor. You got status things: slow, haste, poison. Kind of your typical Final Fantasy spells. I can't think of what you have. Flare. Different ones. You got your shield, protect. Like I said, haste, slow. Typical Final Fantasy spells. I don't think they rock the boat too much, but there are a lot. Most of them were status, ailments, reflect, of course, that you could either they're either status spells that you could cast on yourselves to benefit yourself, or status ailments to actually do harm, which you'd cast on the enemies. And then your elemental spells, etc. So that goes with the battle system. So all characters kind of have a special skill. Like I said, later on, just about all the characters could learn magic because they acquired espers, which taught certain spells. So each character kind of had like a gimmick. Edgar used tools, which is like crossbow, a gas gun. I forgot the name of it, etc. Sabin, his brother, did blitz, which are like karate techniques. So basically, every character had like, besides just hitting with their equipped weapon, like a special skill that would either do more damage to one enemy or multiple enemies. So you had every character pretty much had fight, which was use your equipped weapon, whether it was a sword, a rod, whatnot. And then they had their special skill, the thief stole, etc. And then most characters then later on, like I said, had access to magic too. So they could cast pretty much every character if you wanted to. You could teach them all the same skills. Some characters could only learn some skills, but the majority could learn all of them. But like I said, if you had a magic user like Terra, she just had higher stats in magic. So her spells are always going to be more powerful than, Locks or something. Who's the thief?
All right. So just kind of breezing over a little bit. I think you start this one, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So Final Fantasy VI is, I think, more or less. I think they have the same sort of battle system. So there's very little innovation. I mean, there's a little bit of innovation because you get the where you can do the special attacks with the weapons you use. For example, Khan could do the very famous X Strike and stuff like that, and stuff like that. I like that. Personally, I find the not just like of your game, Cheeto, but I do find the magic system in 9 to be a pain in the ass. Like, it's really complicated. Whereas like in 7, you have the summoning system, and also you have the pretty easy to use. Now the thing is that it has very, very famous summons, like for example, Knights of the Round, other spells like that, where like you can literally like really bring off some really horrific death on people. Because nothing would beat Genova or Sephiroth more than casting Knights of the Round like 7 or 8 times at him. Because he literally would
I'm gonna say, I think if you cast Knights of the Round once, he's dead.
Yeah. And the thing is that it's just again the thing is it's not complicated. You can you know where to buy stuff. You can level up very fast. You can equip stuff, and it levels you up pretty easily. I think the level up system's pretty easily. I think the 1 in 9 is a bit too complicated for people, especially it's supposed to be played by kids. I think 6 is too simplistic in that it just cracks one button. There's no strategy or knowledge of what you really need for a particular characters. Where in 7, you know to level up Aerith to be the healer, and no one else to do to maybe major and magic and stuff like that. I really prefer 7's system over either ones. I think the both of them have flaws that you can't overlook.
Yeah. Well, here's the funny thing is that 6 and 9 have almost identical types of magic systems, except for where you find your magic. So in Final Fantasy VI, you arm a summon to a character, and that character has a percentage. So after every battle, they get a certain percentage. If you have Doom, if this summon has Doom, and it's at 3%. So every battle you fight, I think you get 3% every battle. So the exact same thing in 9 except it's with weapons or armor or accessories. There's certain magic and statuses that are attached to these items. And then so after a certain, you get AP, and then after a certain amount of AP, you learn those abilities and keep them. Here's the thing that with Final Fantasy VII, and don't get me wrong, I love the materia system. I am not sitting here saying that the materia system is any way. It's fun. It's inventive. It is definitely something that can never be replicated again, in my opinion. However, you don't get any. Every character in the game is a blank slate. Like you can, except for minor status changes or minor like status levels, like your magic attack and stuff like that. Every character can be anything. If you want Barrett to be a healer, although he's not as efficient as a healer as Aerith is, he can still be a healer. You can still throw a cure on Barrett and throw a cure on Aerith and still get almost the same results. So like the materia system's great. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a great system. I can't sing its praises enough. And I mean, who else doesn't want to have these little glowy bulbs and put them in your arm and you're like now shooting fire out of your hand, you know? But I feel like there's no permanence to that. All that hard work you do to level up a certain materia, you can just you get new materia and then eventually you run out of slots. Now there are some items in the game where you can actually like overstock people, and there are some status enhancements to that. But at the same time, I could take Tifa's, I could make Barrett my tank and give him HP plus and all these other things and just and I don't know. There's other materia, but like I'm getting remake and materia and OG materia mixed up, lucky up. So you make sure you always hit cover. So like HP up and covers like the perfect tank because their HP is high and they block everybody. So for customization purposes, like, yeah, you can have whatever party you want in 7 and you can put whatever material on them you want and it would work. I feel like in 9 and in 6, there's a little bit more of a debate there because I feel like there's a better balance in 9 in the magic system because you can't just get like once you start arming Eldens and stuff like that. I can't remember what what are they called, espers or whatever in 6. That's when you start getting those abilities, and at least you get them permanent eventually. But then you're locked into that kind of summon until that's over. At least in 9, it's a piece of equipment that is very progressive. Like equipment is supposed to be progressive throughout a game. So I mean, you can so it is very progressive that you get these different levels of magic. Whereas let's say you get a like Go-Go late in the game, but you want to give him some earlier magic. You got to find a summon that has that and you got to make sure it's not being taken up by somebody else and yada yada. It's just I'm nitpicking right now because actually all 3 of the systems are really good and I like them, but I feel like 9's is just holistically 9 is like the better system just because it's like it's specific to the gear, it's specific to the character, and it fits into their role. Because yes, if in 7 you want to have a blank slate and you want to have whatever party members you want, you can have it. But in 9, they are very job specific, and also technically, and in 6 it's not very job. It's like 6 has kind of like the worst of both worlds. Like you can get permanence, but like at the same time, it's like everybody's kind of a blank slate. You can give them whatever magic possible. Now I know Terra's got some pretty high magic and magic defense. I know Celeste has got, so you obviously have your people that you want to use magic, but what's the advantage of everybody else having magic then? Like it almost is like not a double-edged sword, but like just what's the point? You want Terra, you want Celeste, you want I don't remember the other magic user in that game, but then there's like Sabin and Edgar and Locke and stuff like that are like, why are we giving them that much? I mean, yeah, we can give them like status stuff and whatever, but like they're more job specific. They're like Mug and Gear or whatever and Blitz and whatever Edgar's is called. So I really feel like 9 kind of takes all of these elements of 7 and even some of 8 and 6 and kind of mashes it into one and kind of makes this, in my opinion, this like really perfect system that just yes, you're right. In the beginning, it is confusing. You're like, what are you doing? What? But like, if you understand it, it works really well to progress you throughout the game and it makes things balanced, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do think that it's more player friendly for 7. Whereas I think that 6 and 9 are more. I'm going to push people away who aren't really familiar with that particular part, those particular systems. By the way, I'm not saying that the systems in those games are bad. They're not. They're actually, if you can get hands on to them, they're actually pretty. They're all three systems are really player friendly. It's just that the other two take a little bit more getting used to than sevens.
Yeah,
but that's my argument against it.
Yeah.
That seven's more play friendly.
yeah, and I mean, and sevens is definitely user friendly, where it's like you pop this piece of material in and you have it. I get it. It is very user friendly. So, okay, so I say that we kind of go to our miscellaneous. We kind of want to keep this around an hour. So, sorry, Block, but I'm not gonna. Block basically finished up by saying that his is better just because of battle system, plot, main villain, yada yada. So unless you have anything else to add, like let's kind of start just going to our miscellaneous, maybe like side quests and stuff like that. My favorite 9 side quest is definitely Chocobo Hot and Cold. They have some really good side questing stuff. I will give everyone that the Tetra Master is kind of a nightmare. The card game in 9. But Chocobo Hot and Cold is absolutely my favorite side questy game, like side game or whatever in any Final Fantasy, and the one in 8 is probably like my second favorite game. But I don't know. Go ahead. What about you with 7 and yada yada?
Well, my favourite is going to be the obvious one, which is I can never remember the name of it. The sort of like Disneyland-esque sort of like fairground thing.
Gold Saucer.
Yeah. That's so awesome. Like the fact that you can just piss around there, like ride the rides. You could like you and the Chocobo racing, of course. I mean, I just love the Chocobo flaming when you battle Chocobo and it's this it's like very sort of like 60s, good vibrations esque sort of like music when you fight a Chocobo. It's like this it's just great stuff. I mean, I love everything to do with that particular area where because you've been fighting hard to get to that area. And once you get to it, it's sort of like it's so enjoyable that you get to do something that isn't fighting, that you're having fun. But you see that the people that you're controlling are actually having fun as well, and that's so cool, especially when you know what they've done to get to that place.
Yeah, I mean, although the Gold Saucer is fun initially and during the during the story beats, I really feel like that the Gold Saucer, though, once you're done with that and the Chocobo racing is kind of just meh. Final Fantasy VII, like getting some of the bonus materia is fun, like Knights of the Round, HP MP swap, all those those are fine. But I don't know. I mean, to me, Final Fantasy VII and 6 to me does not have a lot of great bonus content. There are some bonus areas in 7 that kind of edge it out of 6. 6 just doesn't have a lot, if I remember right. I think there's an arena that you can go to and fight. But really, I mean, there's not much to do there. Whereas in 9, I mean, you've got frog catching, you've got Tetra Master if you're into it. You've got blue magic where you can go around and this kind of goes along with 7's enemy skills. I mean, you've got Chocobo Hot and Cold is by far, like, not only is it involved in like the actual Chocobo forest, but it's also involved in like the world too, because you can get chocographs and then go out and find all this stuff. Plus you get to go to like Chocobo Heaven or whatever it is where your bird gets upgraded and stuff. The Osmos, which is one of the hardest bonus bosses, beating out Emerald and Ruby Weapon from 7 that I have ever seen. I've played, and I don't even remember who the bonus boss in 6 is. I don't even remember. I think it's Omega. I think there's an Omega weapon in 6. But yeah, so I really feel like that the side questy stuff in 7 in 8, 9 really does a really good job. There's also the auction house, which is a lot of fun. It's not a huge side questy thing, but it's still side questy enough that you don't have to do it. And then the Moogle thing, the Moogle, Yes, the Moogles, the Moogle net. Where you're taking the letters and stuff back and forth, and I just find all that little stuff very interesting. I will give the Gold Saucer. It's a lot of fun and it's story beats, and doing the chocobo breeding and the races is a lot of fun. But yeah, I don't think there's much to 6 in that department. But I feel like 9 like really knocked it out of the park with like side quests and like post content, if you can call it that. It's not really post content, but like right before the end game.
Yeah, well, I like the fact that we're in this world, and then in 7, and then all of a sudden you open up into the open world where you can go around in that hovercraft thing, and it's just like, it's just so awesome. Because that's one thing that I like about it. And plus, I love the bike riding section as well, which is something else that I did mention, which I think is underrated. I know everyone puts the the VMF, what's it, the video where they they're at the edge of and stuff like that. I love that, but yeah,
I do feel that Final Fantasy VII's limited. Like, I feel like the Gold Saucer and the remake is going to be so much better because I feel like they're going to have so much there. I just felt like the Gold Saucer in 7 was limited based on what they had available.
Have you actually played the remake?
Huh?
Have you actually played the remake?
Yeah.
All right. I was going to say, because like the stuff that's changed in the remake that I don't know what's well for anyone who's not played it. All right, I'll just go say it. Aerith lifts, and literally these like black sort of like necromancer things come out and try and beat you and try and kill her, and you just like fend them off. It's cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but yeah. Okay. So, do you have anything else to add? I was gonna add something else. Oh, so I mean, yeah, Osmo versus the weapons. I've heard that Osmo is so much harder than the weapons. Or Ozma, sorry. He is a pretty hefty little, super boss from I've beaten him before, but I know it was a task. I know there's ways to cheese Emerald and Ruby. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, do you have any kind of additions to any of this?
I just like the fact that, like, a corrupt corporation sends like a cat with a flaming people, like a toy with a cat on the top of it with a speakerphone, and he's the infiltrator agent into your company. Who thinks of that? I mean, I've got to say, like, that coming from 7 alone just puts it on that's awesome list. I mean, I love Kate Seth. So
It's definitely very intriguing. Let's say that.
I mean, the thing is, I'm wondering if he's going to be in the remake, because if he is, then I'll definitely, because I've always wondered what voice. As long as he's not a really annoying voice, then it should be.
He's already been in the remake. He made an appearance.
I think it was brief.
Yeah, it was very brief. I don't even think you heard him, but yeah, it was down. He's definitely in there, which I thought was cool. Okay, well, with that all being said, everybody, thank you very much for joining me and Bossman for our Final Fantasy 6, 7, and 9 debate. Who do you think won the debate, and what is your favorite out of the 3 Final Fantasies? Well, what do you think is the better Final Fantasy out of the 3 selected here? And if you're a Final Fantasy 8 fan, I'm very sorry. But anyway, with all that being said, Gary, thank you very much for joining me. And we will hopefully be doing more Final Fantasy content in the future. I do have some people that I'm chatting with about just some content creation and stuff. So maybe we'll be able to do some more fun stuff with this.
Just so people know that I'm playing through 9 at the moment.
So Gary's playing through 9 because it's the better Final Fantasy for sure.
No, I'm just playing through it.
I know. It's okay. All right. Anyway, so we will catch you guys in the next one. Catch you later.